and welcome in to another episode of the Irrational Confidence podcast. My name is Micah. I am joined, as always, by my fellow host and friend, Kalen, but we are only two-thirds of Irrational Confidence today. Lino was unavailable. He's actually at the Sioux Falls Skyforce tryouts this weekend. So, so we're hoping Lino makes the team. Selfishly, of course, we hope he doesn't make the team so he can come back to the show, but we're rooting for you, buddy, if you're listening. And in all seriousness, we have a very fun show for you guys today. We have some news and notes. And then, of course, as you can probably tell from the title, there was a very fascinating trade in the NBA just a few days ago. It was actually finalized just today, October 2nd. So we're going to get all the way into the Karl Anthony Towns, Julius Randle, Knicks, Timberwolves trade later in the show. And then if there's some time at the end, we'll talk a little media day, a little training camp, things like that. But at the top, the first discussion we're really going to have is kind of about NBA media in general. And the first domino that fell was Adrian Wojnarowski retiring from his job as a journalist slash newsbreaker at ESPN. He's going to take almost like a general manager job. It's his alma mater at a college. So he'll be running kind of like a college basketball program, which apparently was always a dream of his. And I'm sure will be a lot more relaxed than, being on call for the NBA 24/7. But Kalen, what was your initial reaction to hearing that Woj was retiring?
Crazy that St. Bonaventure even had a GM. I guess I don't know. That was it's a weird job to take. But I was kind of surprised. I guess obviously I knew Woj, very prominent figure in NBA media, but he was very well respected. Not just even for the reporting. People talk about how excellent of a writer he was, which I, to be fair, have never read anything that Woj has written. Me personally, I wasn't super affected by this. And it was so weird. I felt bad, and it kind of bleeds into the next thing we'll talk about. But whenever Woj, retired and took this job, I was kind of thinking, oh, this isn't really a big deal for me. And I didn't tweet this, but I thought it to myself. I said, now if Zach Lowe retired, that would suck for us. And then like a week later, so I killed Zach Lowe. I'm so sorry.
Exactly.
But yeah, the Woj thing, I mean, we're still going to get all the news, at the same amount of time. So it just, I don't know. I guess it sucks to not have Woj in the media spaces because, he does seem by all counts an amazing dude. But, I think we're going to get the same information regardless. So that's kind of how I feel.
Yeah.
What you think?
That's true. Yeah, and I think I am probably on the 99th percentile as far as obsessed with NBA transactions and how they're reported.
Okay.
I think I just find it super fascinating to see okay, is this report just a report, or is this from an agent trying to get leverage or a team trying to get leverage? I love following that kind of stuff. It's almost like a whodunit mystery. Like, okay, this guy is in this place. And Woj versus Shams Shams Charania, who's actually a free agent right now, was always interesting to follow because Shams is the player's guy, right? Like I went to Summer League a couple years ago, and I'm not joking. There was a line of NBA players waiting to dap up Shams, who was watching a game courtside.
Wow.
Like they all really respect him, trust him. So if it's coming from Shams, it's usually a player related thing, or it's at least a player perspective. Woj is more the front office guy. That's why he was writing so, beautifully about Joe Cronin during the Damian Lillard saga. He was saying, wow, what an amazing job he was doing. And that's because that's where his insight comes from. So for somebody that is just nerds out about NBA media and NBA news breaking, I just think it's going to be really interesting to see who picks up the slack from Woj. I think Windhorst could do it if he wanted to, but I don't think he wants to do the 24/7 newsbreaker stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest trade we've had since this happened was the Karl Towns trade. We'll talk about a little later. And that was kind of reported by Bobby Marks and then followed up on by Ramona Shelbourne. So it seems like ESPN itself is trying to figure out who's going to be our big news breaker. So we'll see how it unfolds. I mean, like Kalen said, honestly, we'll get the news ultimately one way or the other, even if we get to like where it is in baseball, where sometimes the team just tweets out like, hey, we've acquired this pitcher, like have fun. But one way or the other, we'll get the news. But I love following that kind of stuff to see how teams and agents are using leverage. So
Yeah,
definitely interested in how Woj gets
I
replaced.
think it'll be interesting, yeah, how he gets replaced because and we're about to talk about this in a second. But they fired Zach Lowe. I don't know if it's money related. They've let go several personalities over the past however many years. It seems like they've really been kind of cleaning house, and um, I'm wondering, Shams is not going to be cheap, right? Like he's the
Yeah.
1B guy behind Woj. So I'm curious to see they if ESPN thinks they are news breakers and thus have to have one of the most prominent guys in media, which was going to cost them, which is I guess they're cutting back on costs. So that's going to be interesting how ESPN plays that. I think.
That's a great point. It's like, where will they invest their resources? What do they deem as important for how they're going to be covering the game? And I think that's a perfect time to talk about Zach Lowe.
Yeah.
So just a few days after Woj retired, we got news. I think it was originally reported by The Athletic that ESPN was parting ways with Zach Lowe. And I think the original tweet, which I apologize for not giving credit to the Athletic writer specifically, but basically said Lowe was making like seven figures, and that was a big part of why ESPN wanted
Oh,
to
really? I didn't
part
see that. I
ways
didn't
with
see
him.
that.
hmm
Okay,
So it seems like it was mostly like a financial cost thing. They were
that
just
sucks.
like, I guess they thought they could replace what he does. And this is where I will get on my soapbox.
Go ahead.
There are a lot of people that were like honoring Woj when he retired, like he was like a like prestigious firefighter or something, like this hero. And I made fun of those people, like Adam Schefter, for just like bowing at the throne of Woj. I will be doing that for Zach Lowe. So, first of all, let me just start by saying I am not the host of this podcast if Zach Lowe does not exist. I do not
Wow.
follow the NBA as closely if Zach Lowe does not exist. I do not enjoy the game as much as if he didn't have his job. Like when I first got into the NBA, I started listening to the Low Post and I started listening to, I think it was called the BS Report at that time. It was Simmons' podcast at ESPN.
Mhm.
And it was like, and Simmons, went on to do the Ringer, and I followed him on and off. But Lowe has always been my guy. Just have tremendous amount of respect for how he covers the game really intelligently, but he's never talking above you. He's trying to make it approachable for new fans, but also people that are obsessed with the game. And yeah, I truly like, out of all the podcasts I listen to, which I listen to a bunch, I love this stuff. His was always the one where it's like, oh, I'm going to pause whatever I'm in the middle of, listen to Low Post, then I'll get back to the other stuff, including our own show, which
Yeah.
should say a lot. So I just, I don't want to say too much because it's strange we haven't gotten like his posts saying like, oh, I love my time at ESPN. I'll always cherish, the kind of the boilerplate stuff you get when this happens. So still curious to see what's going on behind the scenes. Does he want to wait to announce what's next before he posts his goodbye? Does he even care about that? I don't know. But if he wants to write about basketball, he will be employed wherever he wants to be
Oh yeah.
employed other than ESPN. Personally, I hope he just does like a Patreon type thing. I would love just to get his content, and like I don't mind paying for it, whatever. Like, so. But what were your thoughts when you heard the Zach Lowe news? I know you kind of alluded to it earlier that it was bad.
Yeah. This was definitely a big deal for me. Zach Lowe, I think, is the smartest basketball. Well, he was the smartest basketball mind at ESPN. I guess the issue for them was that he certainly was not the most popular or the biggest money maker. That's probably Stephen A. Smith. That's why they put him on everything they do. Um, and that's fine. Listen, it's perfectly fine to operate in different spaces. Stephen A. does his thing. I'm not a big Stephen A. guy, but he's respected enough in those spaces. They're gonna miss what Zach Lowe provides eventually. I think this is gonna matter eventually. The bet that ESPN has been making over the past however many years, when they've been letting all these people that we love go, is that they're gonna get the eyeballs regardless. Okay, they're saying that the same amount of people are going to tune in for Monica McNutt and Kendrick Perkins as they would tune in for Zach Lowe, and maybe they're right about that. I guess Zach Lowe really only does like random hits, or he's on the NBA show with Malika Andrews, so I don't know how much eyeballs that generates, how much revenue that generates. Maybe they feel like even though Zach Lowe I'm sure they respect his basketball acumen and what he brought to the company, but maybe the bet that they're making is that it's just not fiscal, right? It's just not feasible to be paying Zach Lowe this and he's not generating the revenue, which is unfortunate. Like, we're diehard basketball fans. Like, we just want the smartest coverage, and that's going to come from Zach Lowe. So I'm 100% going to follow him everywhere, and it sucks that he won't be, in the worldwide leader of sports, but to be honest, I mostly listened or heard Zach Lowe on his own podcast, which he can obviously still do. So I'm not going to be missing anything from Zach Lowe, but it just sucks that this kind of happened to him. And, I wish he was treated better because I feel like he deserves better. But, I'm still going to support Zach Lowe wherever he goes.
Yeah, that's well said. To me, this is like a worrisome sign about ESPN.
Yeah.
This to me, like Zach Lowe, he's going to be fine and I'll follow his content wherever he is. But yeah, for ESPN, as a fan, I'd like to say like, okay, Woj and Lowe are gone now. So all the news outlet, all the news breaking stuff is gone and all of like the written or podcast content's gone. I'm just not going to watch ESPN. Not that I really did before,
Right.
but is as I said, have that same thought. I'm like, they also carry the finals. And they also have half of all the nationally televised games. So as an NBA fan, and not to get too meta about it, but it's like, it's easy to have that initial reaction like, oh, I don't care about ESPN. Like, I haven't watched them for years. But they will shape future fans. They will shape how the league is covered. They will shape what people deem as important. So, yeah, it's just disappointing. And like you said, they're the worldwide leader. I don't understand how they can't have Kendrick Perkins and the Skip Bayless type guys that are like entertaining and fun to watch, but then also have content driven guys like Zach Lowe or whoever it might be. I don't understand how they can't balance both those
Yeah,
things.
my thing with ESPN, like, in fairness to them, you do need Stephen A. Smith for the first take type of shows. Those morning shows that are, I mean, that's like their biggest. That's the biggest show in sports, right? And it's been that way since Skip Bayless was back there. So you do need Stephen A. Smith to drive stuff like that. But ESPN has been trying to fix their horrible halftime pregame show before the games for years. It's not good, and Wode was on that. Not that he was really adding to it, but now he's gone. And I never understood why they couldn't get the Zach Lowe type of guys on there, because people are going to be watching the games regardless of who's doing the halftime show, right? So they're going to still be there. Like, why can't you just provide this instead of like you've been trying to fix with the Stephen A. and the Will Bonds, and it's everybody just says one quick hitter and then you go to commercial because there's too many people, you can't get your opinions off. So I'm not hating on ESPN for having the Perkins of the world, but I wish they kind of saw more in the value of being more balanced. I feel like they're really tilted now, to the hot take artist, which is not my jazz at all.
Yeah, no, well said. And yeah, and we can move on from it from there, but it's definitely feels like it's a big shift in how the NBA is covered. And I do try and specify the NBA because like ESPN's NFL coverage by my standard is awesome. Like
Yeah.
they have great people that cover the NFL
Yep.
and do it in a Zach Lowe type way, but for whatever reason the basketball coverage does not seem to be that way.
Yeah.
So we can move on from that, though. Nothing too much to say here that hasn't already been said, but we do want to give a somber rest in peace to NBA legend Dikembe Mutombo. He passed away, I believe it's this past weekend, only 58 years old, Hall of Famer on the court, but as a lot of people knew before, and they certainly know now, a Hall of Fame person off the court. It did a ton of stuff to grow the game of basketball and do wonderful things, but also his humanitarian efforts, building hospitals, introducing really a whole continent to the game of basketball.
Mm-hmm.
His first global ambassador of the NBA. He's just an incredible person, it seems like, by all accounts. So I want to give him a shout out. And I did want to read this just because I thought it was beautiful. This is from his son Ryan on Instagram. And I felt like this would capture Mutombo better than any of us could. But he said, "My dad will forever be my hero, not because of his success, not because of the millions who over the last 4 decades have come to know and love him. My dad is my hero because he simply cared. He remains the purest heart I have ever known." So if your child is saying that about you, you don't need to know what anyone else thinks.
Yeah.
That's the best cosign there is. So RIP Mutombo, a legend in every aspect, and we'll definitely be thinking of that family as we move forward.
Absolutely.
So shout out to Mutombo. And there's no way to transition back to sports stuff from that, but
Right.
we do have to persevere. So we will now be getting into kind of the main topic of this podcast, which is a pretty massive trade that took place recently.
Oh yeah.
And that is Karl Anthony Towns was traded to the New York Knicks. This is a complex trade. It's technically a 3-team deal that incorporated Charlotte. We'll kind of touch on the money and why Charlotte had to be incorporated later. But as far as the big pieces involved, Towns goes to the Knicks. Julius Randle, Donte DiVincenzo, and a protected Detroit first-round pick are going to Minnesota. And then there's some supplementary things
Is
in
this trade
Charlotte.
finalized yet or no?
It was finalized today.
Oh, okay.
Yep. They finally put it all out. Yeah.
Okay.
So I got all the details. We can kind of get into it. But Kaylin, I want to start with just on the court. What do you think this acquisition does for the Knicks?
Yeah, so this is the angle that my brain wants to go through. I had to like intentionally think about the Timberwolves and their side of it because I was so excited about this trade for the Knicks. Obviously, anytime you get the best player in a trade, you most likely are going to win the trade. And I think Karl Anthony Towns is um, there's a pretty decent gap, I think, in between him and Julius Randle. I do really like Karl Anthony Towns' game, especially what he showed last season. Mike, I'm sure you remember how good he was defensively in that Phoenix Suns series. I was thoroughly impressed. I picked the Phoenix Suns to win 4-0 because partly I thought they would exploit Cat, and that just wasn't the case. So obviously, he's going to do some stretch five things. I'm really thinking about Thibodeau a lot because I'm wondering, is Cat the five Thibodeau's thing? It doesn't feel like a Tom Thibodeau thing. I feel like he would still want to go two bigs. So that's gonna be interesting to keep my eye on.
Let's stop there for a
Go
second
ahead.
because I had that in my notes as well. And I want to talk to you about this.
Yeah.
So Karl Towns, an incredible 3-point shooter for a center. It adds so much value because you can go 5-out spacing with
Mhm.
him. And I think that's kind of the theory of this trade. Like Brunson with 5-out spacing, like that's going to be unstoppable. But you bring up the exact thought I had, which is how long is Tibbs going to play Cat at the 5?
Mm.
Because you noted his defense was improved, but it was in that
Yeah.
role where he wasn't the primary rim protector.
Yes.
Right. And so he was playing power forward and really like a traditional kind of power forward role. And so I just can envision a world where we're 2 weeks into the season and it's like, oh, Precious Achua is actually going to start this game and Josh Hart's going to come off the bench or, whatever it may be. And then Mitchell Robinson, who it's being reported that he might be out like 2 months. It might not be January until he's
Oh,
back.
wow.
But then once he's back, is it going to be Mitchell Robinson and Towns? And I get the concept of it. Obviously, Minnesota just did the two bigs thing and made the conference finals. But to me, that just takes away the value of Cat on offense because he's not like an elite 3-point shooter for a power forward. Like a lot of guys that play the 4 nowadays can shoot. It's kind of rare when they can't. So, and he could still attack mismatches and stuff, but it just doesn't have the same punch to me if he's not going to be at the 5. So, what do you think? Do you think for it to like be fully realized he needs to play the 5, or do you think they can kind of do the Minnesota thing?
I think in a regular season context, in a lot of matchups, it's going to be perfectly fine just from at the 5. This team has a lot of firepower, so I think that's going to be fine. Now in the playoffs, he's going to really be tested. I think listen. This Knicks team has fantastic defenders, but they also have two guys you can attack. So it's kind of like, even though the team is great defensively, if you can just go at Brunson and Cat every single time down the court,
Right.
it could still look rough. So that's one thing I'm interested in. Um, yeah, I guess if I didn't think about that, Mitchell isn't ready to start the year. I think they almost assuredly go Cat at the 5, but we'll see. How did you feel about the loss of Donte DiVincenzo?
So we did our shooting guard rankings fairly recently,
Mhm.
and I think I don't remember where exactly I had him, but Dante DiVincenzo is like a fringe top 10 shooting guard based off last year.
Yeah, based
Like
off last
if
year,
people
yes.
weren't Yeah, if people weren't really following it, like his volume 3-point shooting season was not exaggerating, one of the best ever. He was taking so many threes. I think it was like over 8 a game and shooting 40%. The year before that with Golden State, he wasn't taking as many, but also shot 40%. So to me, the shot is real, and he's a gunner. Like, he'll get him up, and he's a active good defender. He's not all NBA or all defense. But he's a good defender,
Just
and
real
so
quick,
to
Micah,
me,
it was
yep.
8.7 attempts a game, 40% from three.
Okay, so almost 9
Yeah,
attempts. I mean, it was
that's nuts.
insane, and then in the playoffs, it even went higher. Like, I mean, he was getting them up like crazy, and that's really valuable, and we'll talk about that from Minnesota. I think that'll help him, but for the Knicks, I think it's a huge loss, and Shams reported that at the draft, New York offered Mitchell Robinson and Randle for Towns, and the Timberwolves were just like, no. But I guess recently they started being willing to include DiVincenzo in this deal, and apparently that's what really got it rolling. Which I get, because DiVincenzo, like we're talking about, not only is awesome, he makes $11 million a year for the next 4 seasons.
4? Oh,
By
wow.
the by the time his contract's up, that's going to be like, I don't know, like below the mid-level exception. Like, it's crazy how affordable he is. And again, related to the Knicks, you look at their depth now, and they're suddenly a very thin team.
Yeah.
So Mitchell Robinson, like we said, he's out for 2 months, and I like how he plays, but he is often injured. So can you really rely on him? TBD. Other than that, on their bench, you have Deuce McBride, who I like. He's a good, active, point guard, backup, defender type. But I mean, that's not somebody like in a playoff series. You're like, yeah, get Deuce in there. I mean, maybe he can elevate to that. But you're just looking at their lineup, and it's like, dang, like if Josh Hart rolls an ankle,
Yeah.
if Brunson gets hurt, but
Yeah.
like any of these guys, it's scary. And then Randall's creation, I feel like, will also be missed, because Cat can't really run offense. Like, Randall can, run a pick and roll. He can bully ball.
Mhm.
Cat, he averaged 3 assists a game last season, and he averaged 2.9 turnovers. So, I mean, this isn't a guy that's giving you a ton of
Wow.
creation,
That's
right? So, like, and not that Brunson's going to be out much, especially with how Tibbs plays guys, but it's just Mikal Bridges? Is he running all your non-Brunson offense? Like, I think with how the team's set up right now, he kind of has to, which I like Bridges a lot, but you really need that kind of second half of that, like, first Brooklyn stint Bridges to be a thing if he's really going to be running all of your non-Brunson actions.
yeah, I didn't even see they added Cameron Payne to the roster.
Yep.
Is he gonna run a little backup point, maybe?
Yeah, probably. I think Shamit's on there too.
Oh
So
God.
yeah, it's guys like we've seen, they can get hot, they can hit some shots, but it's like, especially wings. I mean, obviously they're starting 3 great wings, but after that, it's like, dang, I don't know,
Yeah.
what you're
So
going to.
when I initially saw that they included Donte DiVincenzo, at first I thought, oh, that's fine because I guess I just misremembered that they had more wings. I was thinking about how they added Mikal Bridges and how that's going to eat up a lot of the minutes, and the way Donte played, you're not expecting to lose minutes. Right, he had a career year, so I think maybe that went into it a little bit. I mean, we'll probably see more Deuce McBride, and I like him in spots for sure. We'll see how he looks with a bigger role. I'm not super confident in that, but at the same time, the insulation of the team, there's so much talent here. It might not matter too much. I mean, this is no question one of the best starting fives in basketball. And when they get Mitchell Robinson back, this is going to be a team that's definitely going to challenge the Celtics. And I wanted to ask you about that. Like, how do you feel about this team going up against the juggernaut that is the Celtics after this trade?
It's interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot, because later in the show we'll kind of talk about from both sides, would we have done this or not? And it's definitely a talent upgrade. Like, Cat is more talented than Randall, and he fits more seamlessly than Randall.
Yeah,
But as far as like championship percentage, like if they were like 30% chance to win the championship before, or whatever it might be, I don't know how much higher I'd go with that. I mean, I go a little higher, but to
really.
me, I think, yeah, I think, I mean, DiVincenzo was so important for them. Now they have no depth. Cat is a good player in the playoffs. I'm not like convinced he's going to be awesome. And like, like, let's do Boston specifically. So if I'm Boston and I'm going against that starting five, I'm like, okay, well, I'm putting Jason Tatum on Karl Towns. Like,
Hmm.
have fun trying to post him up 10 times. And I'm just going to put Porzingis on Josh Hart and let him just do his rim roaming thing. if Josh Hart shoots us out of a series, all right, well, we'll live with that. And so that's kind of my concern, is like, how much will they neutralize what Cat brings? And not that Randle would be like dominating the Celtics or anything, but then at least you still have a move kind of in the chamber, and you still have some depth with DiVincenzo. So to me, I think they're the second best team in the East. I do have them ahead of Philly, Milwaukee, but I still don't have them even in the same tier as Boston.
Interesting. I think that's a really interesting opinion because I think I want to go the other way there. I really like this team against Boston if they're healthy, obviously. Um, Boston, and I can't wait to do our season previews and really dive into this. Boston's kind of quirky vibe they got going makes you want to short them a little bit. They don't have Kristaps Porzingis to start the year, so I think it'll be a little tougher for them. But I really like this matchup. I think they have the athletes, they have the defenders, they have the shooting. I know they lost Donte, but Cat's gonna replace a lot of that. I'm leaning towards the Knicks just being the number one team in the East. So that'll give them home court advantage. Um, I really like. I'm super super high on this trade. I guess is what I can say. I loved it. I love this trade for them. I know they lost Donte, but I think the gap between Cat and Randle, particularly in the playoffs, like I think Cat's just a much better player. Not much, but he's better than Randle in general. But in the playoffs, no, not the biggest sample size, but Julius Randle has been one of the worst playoff players you've ever seen. He's really bad. So Cat's going to be much better than that. And you mentioned the fit's not going to be difficult at all. They have the Villanova guys, so the chemistry, the vibes is going to be awesome. I'm super high on the Knicks after this trade.
Nice. I like that. I just to give Julius Randle a little credit, I do want to point out most of his playoff series he's been guarded by Evan Mobley and Bam Adebayo. So I do just want to throw him that bail because they're probably the two worst guys. Like those are the last guys he'd want to be guarding him.
Probably.
But he has struggled for sure. But yeah, I mean, I like what you're saying though, because I do feel like we were kind of highlighting the concerns with the deal. But like you said, it's a big talent upgrade, and especially like right now, we're just talking on court. We're not talking about financially, the difference between what Randle and Cat makes or whatever. So it definitely, if they can make it sing, could work. Because again, Brunson just getting to attack mismatches with 5-out spacing is going to be a nightmare for teams to try and keep up with. And Boston especially, I mean, you have the wings matching up, which is a lot of fun. Both teams have a shooting 5. Like it would be fun to watch that series unfold. But as we're talking, and I don't want to be like too negative, but the more we're talking, the more I'm just picturing Thibodeau playing these starters so much during the regular season.
That could be an issue
because he already does that, but now that there's such a big drop off between the starters and the bench, like, used to Josh Hart was coming off the bench and he's like, oh yeah, that's that's a sub I'm comfortable with. Now it's like, it's these 5 guys. And at least for the first 2 months, really just Deuce and Precious are the 2 guys that, he's probably going to trust off the bench. So I just hope Tibbs is careful. I know they'll probably be motivated to get the 1 seed. Cause I mean, Eastern Conference Finals versus the Celtics in Madison Square Garden. Like that would
he just got the NBA's number 1 Iron Man in Mikal Bridges. He's going to see if he can break that dude. No one's been able to break him.
So right.
He's going to try to break that guy.
It's like, this is my challenge. They're right. Yeah, and OG's the other one. Even with a non-Tibbs coach, he just has not been able to stay super healthy, especially towards the end of seasons. So, yeah, I think the more we're talking, I am really excited about the Celtics matchup, and I hope we just get to see it because that would be really fun. So I'll leave the floor to you. Do you have any other Knicks thoughts, or do you want to transition to the Minnesota side of this?
Did you want to get into Minnesota before we hit some of the financial stuff? Because I do have some financial stuff for the Knicks.
Yeah, I think we'll do the Minnesota on court, and then we can get into kind of the financial aspect.
Well, then we can move on to Minnesota then.
Cool. So like we said, basically they're getting the first round pick. It's pretty heavily protected. I don't know if it'll ever really become anything, but the players they're getting.
Whose pick was it again?
Julius Randle. It's Detroit's pick. It's like top 13 protected, top 10 protected. Then it like turns into 2 seconds. Don't quote me on that exactly. Okay. But it's basically like Detroit would have to have a huge turnaround for you to get a first round pick.
Not happening.
So probably going to be like 2 seconds. Yeah. So it's really DiVincenzo and Randle. Dude, the Randle fit is tough. Chris Finch said today that he's going to start Randle. Like, because I kind of thought, maybe 6-man, but like he's going to start Randle.
No, Randle would hate that.
Then you're starting Randle, Gobert, and Jaden McDaniels, who can shoot like accurately. But if you've watched Wolves games, it's like corner, set, catch and shoot threes. He's not somebody that's a shooter.
Yes.
And in the playoffs, even less so, is like respected. So you're starting three guys that are not drawing a lot of space. You have Conley, who's knocked down. That's great. And then you have Ant, who he can shoot it, but you want the ball in his hands anyway. So I am worried about what this is going to do to their offense. So to start there, Kalen, what do you think of the offensive fit here?
Well, you just got Julius Randle on a contract year, so probably want some shots.
True.
If I just had to guess, probably want some shots. And I'm thinking about it like even from a chemistry standpoint, because we talked last season about, and we gave Cat his praise for, this was originally his team and they stunk, and now you get Anthony Edwards and he kind of takes over. Not easy to kind of set your ego aside. So that was really impressive from Cat. I'm wondering if how Julius comes in, if he's thinking, oh, this is a new team and they had a really great season last year. Let me kind of just go along and see how it go. I don't know Julius Randle well enough to be confident in saying either way, but just the history of professional sports. When you're in a contract year, what we've seen is guys want to get their numbers because they want to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
And just being traded to a new team, he doesn't have any equity in what they've been doing. And I'm even thinking he might be like a D'Angelo Russell to the Golden State Warriors that year when they kind of tested him out. Does it work? It's not working. Let's just trade him. Right. So that's kind of how I'm thinking they're going to do with Julius Randle, to be honest. If it's working, great. We'll keep him. We'll sign him. Maybe. I don't know. They just kind of traded Cat to get rid of the financial stuff. I don't know. But I guess they'll sign him if it's good. But if it's not working offensively, I don't think Julius Randle goes into the playoffs with this team. I think he gets moved, is how I'm thinking. And
Yeah.
and there, there's been the jokes made about the ISO stuff and waving off, and I get all that. That is kind of his game. He does like to hold the ball a little bit. You know, it's it's gonna be tough. It's gonna depend on, I guess, Randall's kind of his mental state. If he wants to win a championship, like this is a team where you can at least go for it. Like they made the conference finals last year, which is kind of interesting that they were even thinking about kind of making a big deal when the team did have so much success. But um, I think that. Do you think that Julius Randle will be just kind of a more natural fit at the 4 spot next to Gobert than Karl Anthony Towns was? What are you thinking about that?
I don't think so, just because I
Mm,
didn't realize how poor of a shooter Randall is. He's been like, I want to say
really?
for his career from three, he's been over 34% like twice or
He
something.
had that
He had
outlier
one.
year.
Yep. He had that 1 year with New York where he was like 40% from three. And then everything outside of that has been like 36% or lower or something.
Yeah.
So that's my fear, is teams are going to play off of him if, Ant's trying to run a pick and roll with Gobert. And they can try and maybe do like Randall Gobert pick and rolls, but then the defense is going to help off of maybe Ant, definitely McDaniels. So yeah, the fit is concerning to me. I almost wonder if they'll do a version of what Cleveland does and try and play like they'll start them together, but they'll really minimize the overlap between Randall and Gobert. Maybe try and play Randall mostly with like Nas Reed, who can actually space the floor a little bit.
Yeah.
And so you're almost playing Randall at the five. That's what I would do, because like I like his passing on this team. Like
Yeah.
he's people kind of think of him as like this black hole on offense, but he can really dish the rock. Like he can draw help, he can attack mismatches, but all of that just becomes so much harder if the spacing
I
is as
I
cramped
feel
as it
like
looks
I
like
have
it'll
to
be.
change my opinion on this in real time. I didn't look up the Randall numbers because I was fooled by that 1 year. I thought, no, he can shoot the ball. I didn't even bother to look it up. 31% last year, 34% the year before, 30% the year before that. This guy can't shoot the
It's
ball.
bad.
Oh no, I did not know that. It's really bad. No,
It's bad.
that's actually an issue for me. Actually, that's an
Yeah.
issue. Because if you're gonna play this guy next to Gobert, now you got two almost non-shooters out there. Oh man, that's really rough. I was like I wasn't as high on the trade for the Timberwolves because they did give up the best player, but I did like Randle enough that I thought this would still be an extremely formidable team, and they still have Anthony Edwards, so they most likely will be, and Gobert is still going to be a great rim protector. But holy cow, that is going to be something for what is it, Chris Finch, right? For Chris
Yeah,
Finch to
Chris
have to
Finch.
really figure out. What
Yeah.
about defensively? How are you thinking? Obviously, Cat definitely was improved last year. I don't know where Randall is defensively right now. What do you think?
Yeah, Randall, to me, and I believe it was Nikias on the dunker spot made this point. He was saying Randall's best coverage is probably switching, and he can
Okay.
kind of like have an intense burst of effort if he's like on the ball with the ball in front of him.
Mhm.
And I think Gobert is probably underrated in how much he can switch. It's really just the better offensive players that can attack Gobert in those situations. So to me, I wonder if they lean more into that, go to more of a switch scheme, and that way you're not worried about Randall trying to fly over and help on defense and do stuff like that. I think they might just play more traditional switch coverage, to protect Mike Conley when they can. But I don't think their defense will be as good. Just I don't think it would have been as good if Cat had stayed, just because it was like incredibly good.
Mhm.
But I don't think the drop off will be awful. I think it'll just be a slight drop off. They were the number 1 or 2 defense last year. I would project maybe like number 9 or something this year.
Okay. So you think that they'll switch 1 through 4 though, right? They're still gonna have Gobert in the drop.
I think mostly, but I think it'll be team dependent.
Hmm.
Especially in the regular season. Like I don't mind Gobert going out on sub All Star level perimeter players.
Okay.
I think we see Luca fry him, and we're like, "Oh, this guy's a scrub." But you see smaller guards. I personally always think of Tyler Hero trying to attack Gobert 1-on-1, and he gets Tyler. I love you for listening, but he gets clamped every time. It's- he tried to dunk on him one time, and Gobert like swatted it and like glared at him, and it's like, yeah, man, like I know you see these highlights of like elite Hall of Famers frying him, but he's still like a decoy. Like you can't like he can move his feet.
Okay. I'm gonna pay close attention to Gobert this year because I'm pretty confident that the NBA players feel the exact opposite about that guy. Especially, well, to be fair, Draymond just hates him, but
Well, yeah,
there's that. But I feel like a lot of guys don't think he's the best defensive player, and they kind of point to the fact that he does get. I mean, I guess you can say they're star players. I feel like if you have a little bit of a handle and you're quick, there's no way you should be. Oh, Gobert's on me. I better pass it. So I'll be paying close attention to that, and I'll be definitely be paying close attention to Julius Randle defensively as well. We kind of know what he is offensively, and I'm curious how that'll work, but. I want to watch him defensively because, like you mentioned, this was a fantastic defensive team last year. They're probably poised to come back to earth a little bit, but I still feel like they have the pieces to be a solid defense. I mean, they still have McDaniels. Anthony Edwards is still in his physical prime. Gobert's still there. So the team should still be solid defensively. So I'll definitely be keeping an eye on Randall there.
yeah,
Let's talk
for
about
sure,
Donte DiVincenzo a little bit. Um,
dude. It sounds weird. He's like the most important thing they got in this trade. They needed volume shooting so badly.
yeah.
Like, I mean, Conley, he's a good shooter, but it's like catch and shoot stuff. He's not like running off a lot of screens. DiVincenzo, like, it's gonna be hard for Finch not to play him at least 30 minutes a game off the bench. Like if anybody out there is like into gambling, go ahead and submit that Donte 6 Man of the Year ticket. Cause I would book that right now. This dude, I mean, if you remember like Malik Beasley's best seasons in Minnesota, just coming in and bombing threes. This is
Mhm.
going to be that to an even better degree from a guy who can defend. So I think DiVincenzo is going to be huge for them. And I think, like you pointed, if Randall's not long from Minnesota, I would really look at starting DiVincenzo. Because, I mean, Ant's big enough to guard a lot of threes.
Mhm.
So you could start Conley, DiVincenzo, Ant, McDaniels, Gobert. Then you can do a
Ooh.
lot of switching. Yeah, it's
Ooh.
kind of fun, right? Like then your
Yes.
spacing isn't as
I
bad.
like that.
So that's why I like Randall as a 6 man. But like you said, contract year. Chris Finch already said they're going to start
He
him.
ain't going
So
for that. I'm I- I'm
yeah,
I'm curious. Okay, educate me a little bit because I know Dante shot the ball very well and he shot it at volume. You said he can shoot with movement. Is that
Mhm.
right? He's a movement shooter.
Yeah, and in the sense of off-ball movement, like, I'm not saying JJ Redick
Okay.
kind of like 3 pin downs, but it's like, "Oh, this guy has driven to the basket. Donte was on the wing, now he's replaced to the
Okay.
corner. He's flying to the corner, catching fire," and,
Okay.
just yeah, so that's I mean movement in that way, but obviously we saw, I mean, he can generate attempts.
Yeah.
That's what mostly matters, and he can hit off the dribble, like, he'll just pull up, so if he can generate 9 attempts a game in that kind of role, I think he could easily get close to that in Minnesota as long as he's getting the same kind of playing time.
Yeah, I think the average NBA fan doesn't fully understand when you have a guy shooting nine threes a game and he's hitting it efficiently. Like just getting 9 threes up in an NBA game is extremely difficult, and I think it's not like immediately obvious because like, well, you can just shoot whenever. Like, but it's not. That's not exactly how it works. You have to actually be a guy that can hit, different type of movement shots and hit in all different areas. So like 9 threes a game, is incredibly impressive, and I think you hit it exactly. Like they need a guy that can get these shots up. I did like Mike Conley's shooting performance last year. I thought Mike Conley was just generally underrated. I'm a big Mike Conley guy. Um, so I do like it there, but you're right. Dante is going to be their best, most important shooter. And putting him in that starting lineup, like you said, that is fun. I think that Dante can definitely hold his own defensively. So no issues there. The team is faster. Oh man, that's an exciting lineup. I guess we're not going to get it like you said. He already announced it, but man, that's an exciting. But we can still see that 5-man group close some games
Yep.
potentially. Um, and that's one thing that I will be interested in. The vibes of this team is going to be a thing for me because if Julius Randle's on the bench, during money time in the fourth quarter, which is possible, especially if he's not having a great game or if his shots aren't going in. That's going to be interesting to kind of see that dynamic. I'm really thinking that Julius Randle, there's I'm going to say 60% chance he does not make it to the end of the year on this team. I think they're going to make it. And look, he's an unrestricted free agent next year. Okay, so that's generally regarded as a valuable trade asset. He's still a talented player. He just needs like a right fit around him. But Julius Randle's a good player, and he's an All NBA player. So
Yeah.
I still like him, but on this team in this fit, he might not be best suited.
Yeah. No, I'm totally with you. I think, and I saw that when the trade initially happened, that it's like, okay, this is like kind of a rest stop for Julius Randle. Like he's going to get rerouted. It's just going to be how soon does he get moved? Because the fit just doesn't really make sense. And especially in a contract year, I think he's going to be very motivated, like you were saying, to show why he's worth a deal. We see a guy like Brandon Ingram, who I think most people would say is better than Julius Randle, or at least a similar type of player. And
Mhm.
he's having a hard time getting a contract with his current team or finding a team to get traded to get this next contract. So guys around the league are taking notice. Like you have to really establish yourself as a guy that can help winning and drive winning. So it's going to be interesting to see how it kind of unfolds. But
Mhm.
now I think that is a good time, speaking of contracts, to get into the financial aspect of this trade.
Yeah.
And I think it's an interesting space to be in as an NBA fan, because I think kind of gone are the days where you can just evaluate a trade on, okay, this player's this good, this draft pick is worth that much. I like this trade, I don't like this trade. You really almost have to have like not a ridiculous amount, but a significant amount of cap, second apron, first apron knowledge to even totally grasp a trade, which I feel like probably this is a separate conversation, but hinders like NBA fandom. Because in the NFL, it's like, oh, they just guaranteed this guy's like signing bonus to be half his contract. You can just like create cap space. So, but with this deal, immediately when it happened, a lot of us who follow the game, analysts have been talking about this. Minnesota was in a tough financial situation. They were going to be a second apron team probably for the foreseeable future, which, as has been established by a lot of people, is pretty much untenable. If you're a second apron team for basically 3 out of 5 seasons, your draft pick gets frozen. It gets moved to 30th in the draft in perpetuity. It's very damaging, along with a lot of other punitive things.
Mhm.
So Minnesota was going to have to make a move. They didn't have to make one now, and it didn't have to be Cat. And I think that's where some of the criticism could come into play. is because, they're kind of framing this as like, oh, we're building around Anthony Edwards. We want to make sure we like maintain versatility around him, which I appreciate. But you just traded the only other established young all-star on the team. Gobert probably only has 1 or 2 years left. McDaniels is a good player, probably never an all-star. So, and you just drafted Rob Dillingham, but you just drafted him. There's a huge question mark of how long it'll take for him to help Ant win. So, Kalen, I want to throw it to you. Before I do, I just want to hand out or like kind of iron out the actual numbers here. So Karl Anthony Towns is on a supermax. If you guys didn't know, it's about 35% of the salary cap.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 4 years remaining, around averaging it out. It's like 55 million per year. So massive contract for Towns the Knicks took on. Randle, on the other hand, second biggest salary in this deal, is making around 30 million this year, and then he has a player option this summer for 30 million that, like we talked about, we expect him to opt out of to pursue a new big contract. But as we know, sometimes that doesn't work out and guys just opt in if nothing's there.
Mm-hmm.
Then finally, the deal we already referenced, Donte DiVincenzo, 4 more years, around 11 million. Super duper bargain.
He's got to
So
fire his agent, bro.
yeah, absolutely.
Do it.
So just hearing those contracts and kind of what they mean to the different teams, what are your thoughts on the financial aspect of the deal?
Yeah, there's absolutely no question at all. This trade on both sides was financially motivated. We've mentioned Julius Randle, unrestricted free agent. Okay, so if the Knicks keep him, okay, so he's averaged pretty much 18 shots a game since he's been in New York, right? That's a good amount of shots. And then you got Brunson, you got Mikal Bridges. Okay, those guys are going to take a lot of shots. OG Anunoby's going to take some shots as well. So I'm wondering, if they just move this guy because based on what they've seen from him when he's been there, how he's played in the playoffs, there's no way they're going to agree on a number for an extension. I just did not see that happening. So I think that's why they moved him. Also, I've mentioned the vibe several times. How are the vibes going to be on that team when they got the Villanova connection going on, and Julius
I'm
Randle's
the one
going to.
Kentucky guy.
Hey, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that. But Randle will kind of be on the out a little bit in the group. So I really thought that's why they moved him. And for Minnesota, incredibly disappointing for fans of that team. They obviously got rid of the better player. And everybody's kind of been talking about this team going to be a second apron team. The owner is not one to spend a ton of money on the team. You really kind of saw this coming, which really sucks because you kind of wanted to feel like, oh man, they were so close last year. They had a tough series against Dallas, but that goes a different way. They're in the finals. Who knows? They match up better with the Celtics. Who knows how that goes? So you really want to run that back. I mean, I said earlier, when you have this much success, it's strange to, I'm a Laker fan. We blow it up every year, regardless of whether we win the title or not. But most teams don't operate like that, especially small market teams that usually keep guys together. So this was just unfortunate and a strange decision. And what I don't get, Micah, is that the Wolves must have almost no intention of paying this guy Randle. I think they're almost certainly going to trade him because if he has a good year, you got to pay him. Like he's going to want money, and it's going to be warranted. He had a solid year, so I almost feel like they're almost guaranteed to trade this guy. So I mean, and then the cat piece of it, that thing really balloons, man. I know
Oh yeah.
I know we see the salary cap go up every year, but holy crap, 61 mil for Karl Anthony Towns is a lot of money.
Right.
Really shout out to Brunson for giving those boys a deal because that's going to be an
I have
important
that in
factor
my notes
going forward.
Yep. So yeah, you hit on a lot of stuff there. I think for me, the biggest like question mark and what kind of leaves this, like if you were going to grade it, I feel like you have to give this trade an incomplete right now because it's like, what does Minnesota end up doing with Randle?
Yeah.
Do they get 2 first-round picks for him? Okay, that's pretty good return. Or are they going to have to pay him 3 years, 30 million after this summer? And then it's like, ooh, don't love that. You're still saving some money compared to Cat, but now you have a player that doesn't fit as well. And to me, I just think if I was a Minnesota fan, I'd be like, man, the Gobert trade was 2 summers ago. The first year Cat gets hurt, it's a disaster. Second year, everything clicks perfectly. We have the most successful season, arguably in team history. And now it's like, well, that's over. Here's Julius Randle. Like, have fun.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, I don't think it's really hard to argue they didn't make the team worse right now and potentially also in the future, which as a fan base, like, that's just a tough pill to swallow when you
That's
just had the
Minnesota.
most success you've had. Yeah. Also, who owns the team? Who is the owner of the
Couldn't even
team?
tell you.
That would be nice to know. Has that been decided? Like, that probably factors in a lot here.
Right.
So, but
Well,
yeah, what you
it
brought up
definitely does
about
because the guys trying to buy the team said they wanted to spend that money. They
right.
promised they would. Now, the reason that the guy didn't sell is because he was trying to argue that they didn't have the money and da. But the guy that owns the team currently is the cheapskate, quote unquote cheapskate. And the guys who wanted to buy the team were the guys who wanted to pay. So I would assume that
Right.
they did not officially get a hold of this team.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And from the Knicks side of it, you hit on it. All of the things they've done this summer, getting Bridges, signing OG Anunoby to that huge deal,
Mhm.
getting Towns is all possible because they have probably a like fringe top 10 player in Jalen Brunson making like 17% of the salary cap. And he signed an extension that's going to take him to about 22% of the
Crazy.
salary cap for the next 3-4 years. So it's, as a if I was a Knicks fan, I would like get a tattoo of Jalen Brunson because that's just a crazy advantage for a
Yeah.
team to have a superstar making like nothing.
The NBA should have
But
investigated that. I feel like he's getting something because his whole family
I
is
feel
in the
that way.
front
His
office.
dad works for the team.
They're
That's
definitely
how I
getting
feel.
something on the back end there.
I know. Also, speaking of conspiracies, I believe Leon Rose is Carl Towns' former agent. Carl Towns is another CAA guy going to the Knicks. Like,
God.
so but it's working for the Knicks. Like they've acquired a bunch of good guys that all happen to be repped, by the guy running the team or formerly, repped by him. So yeah. And then this is like very nerd cap salary stuff, but I just wanted to point this out to listeners if they hadn't heard this because I thought it was pretty cool. So right now, Minnesota and New York are both first apron teams. First apron teams, when they do a trade, they cannot take back more salary than they sent out.
Mm-hmm.
And as we've just established, in this trade, New York is taking back more money in town. So it was like about $8 million more because there were some other small contracts. So everybody's looking at the books after Shams like breaks this news, and they're like, this isn't adding up. Like they're going to have to get a third team involved, and they're probably going to have to move Mitchell Robinson because they don't really have any other salary they could move to get to 8 million other than like Josh Hart. And I even heard this on a podcast. They were like, yeah, and you can't stack minimum salaries. Like you're not allowed to aggregate minimum salaries to make up the difference. So what the Knicks did, apparently, if I'm understanding this correctly, they had 3 guys that had been on the roster last season that were free agents. Basically, no one wanted to sign these guys. And what they did was they did a sign and trade. So they signed these 3 guys that were free agents. I apologize, I don't have their names. And they signed and traded them to Charlotte, and they signed each of them to the minimum salary plus $1. So they are not technically making a minimum contract, and that way they were able to stack these 3 contracts to make the difference.
Did the NBA not think about that? Is that the most obvious way to beat that? It's obvious. Well,
it's so crazy. All they had to do was give Charlotte, I think Charlotte ended up getting like 3 seconds total to take on 3 contracts of guys they can probably waive because, as we talked about on the show, when you do a sign and trade, well, it's got to be a 3-year deal. Well, guess what? It's year 2 and year 3 of all 3 of those guys' contracts is fully non-guaranteed.
Oh my
so they
God.
can be waived almost immediately. Yeah, it's so silly. It's like if you're going to put these rules, like these restrictions in, did you not think how to enforce them? Like, I'm glad they're not able to enforce them because I think they're silly in the first place.
Yeah.
If a team can build a good team, just let them do it. But it's cool to me. I think it's cool, and I think we'll see more front offices do this. And it's also just to highlight the timing of this. If the season had started, they wouldn't have been able to do this because technically free agency is over at this point. They couldn't have done these little mini sign-in trades. So that's another reason this had to happen right now. So that's some cap nerd stuff for you guys, but I thought that was really cool, and I bet it's going to be a trend we see going forward into next offseason.
Oh, heck yeah, definitely. definitely.
And yeah, the NBA needs to kind of like troubleshoot these things. I feel like they just come up with plans and they're like, yeah, there will be unintended consequences, but we're not concerned about it. We'll find out once it's official.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so that's the Towns trade. There's a lot of moving pieces to it. There's a lot of financial aspects to it. There's a lot of players moving around. I'm really excited to see what the Knicks look like. I think they could
Definitely.
definitely be the number one seed in the East, and I am nervous about what Minnesota's going to look like because that fan base could get very upset very quickly. Because that kind of looks like a raw deal on their end. And of course, if we want to get super Heat Lakers, does this upset Anthony Edwards? Is this the first domino to him asking out
Ooh,
of
I
Minnesota?
like that.
You know,
Well, I guess not because he's almost surely going to Miami. Spo's
wow,
got him in his
he
back
does
pocket
love
already.
Spo. Spo has laid the groundwork. It's for sure. Speaking of Spo and just the NBA in general, we pretty much have had all the media days now. Training camp has started. Whether it's for the Lakers or just kind of any team in general, we got a little time left. Is there anything you would like to hit on that you've seen kind of coming out of camp?
Yes, thank you for this. I really wanted to talk about this. I was hoping we had time. Um, Whenever we did our top 10 shooting guards and we had that discussion about Jalen Green or whatever, and I said, well, I'm buying a lot of Jalen Green stock because it's cheap and you can get a lot, and I think he's going to be good. This offseason, I I watched like an hour-long YouTube video, and it was D'Angelo Russell having a golf weekend with Austin Reeves, and Devin Booker randomly was there too. Um, and it was just one of those things. Micah, you were like you've been on this. Like I think you tweeted or retweeted that Jimmy Butler playing dominoes with Tyler Hero, and how like man, like the
Mm-hmm.
brotherhood, the vibes, it makes you feel really good. Um, that's where I am with D'Angelo Russell. I
Hmm.
watched his interview from yesterday's media day, and one thing I loved, like he apologized for his lack of professionalism last year, which was awesome. Shows he's in a good mind state. He talked about how he immediately got in contact with JJ Redick, and they had a great conversation about basketball and
Mm-hmm.
what he was going to be this season. And he said how much he respected JJ's IQ and all that. I'm buying so much D'Lo stock this year, guys. I don't care if he breaks my heart. I'm buying up stock in D'Angelo Russell. I think they're talking about this could be a career year for him. I'm just really high. When I watched that video of him and Austin Reeves golfing, and they've been so close ever since D'Lo's got here. God, they're just like brothers, man. And the vibes in Lakerland are fantastic. D'Lo feels really good about Darvin Ham not being there. I think a lot of the Lakers were kind of throwing little shots at Darvin Ham last year. So I just wanted to say I'm buying D'Lo stock this year, guys. I don't care where it leads me. I just want to take this ride with D'Angelo Russell. I think he's going to have a great shooting year. He broke the record, a single season record for most 3-pointers made in a season for the Lakers last season. Um, I think he's going to be more of that. He's going to be even more in sync with AD. He's the only guy other than LeBron that can really consistently find AD. So I'm really really high on this guy, and I'm
Nice.
vulnerable. Hearts on my sleeve. He'll probably crush me, but I don't care. I like this
I
guy.
love it. I love it. That's the time of year for it too. We were talking before the show. Like, if the vibes aren't good at training camp,
Yeah.
something's very wrong. Like, if the vibes should be good right now, and I feel like that's how I felt like, on my own terms, like with the Heat training camp. Jimmy Butler and Tyler Hero both kind of got some questions where they easily could have made problems, and thankfully just didn't. They just
Mhm.
said the right thing, and I appreciate that as a fan. Like we have had past media days where Tyler Hero's like, I think I'm a starter in this league. Like, I think I deserve to start. And it's like, oh my gosh, now we're doing the
Yeah.
whole thing again.
That
Like,
was
is
Trey
Spo
Murphy
going to
this
start
year,
or
by the way, who said I should start.
right?
Okay, Trey.
And this year Tyler was like, I just want to help the team win. We have the best coach in the league. Like, I'm going to do whatever he tells me to do. I just want to bring a championship to this team. So it's just like, that's so easy to say, but a lot of guys, because of their pride or their ego, won't say it. So I appreciate stuff like that. And then Jimmy Butler too. Like, media asked him straight to his face. They're basically like, how'd you feel about Pat Riley telling you to shut your mouth because you weren't playing? And Jimmy, we know Jimmy. Jimmy can get nasty if he wants to get
That reporter
nasty.
is
Jimmy,
trying to sink the team. What are you doing, man?
yeah, shout out to Ira Winderman trying to take down the Miami Heat. But yeah, and Jimmy was like, "Listen, I love Coach Pat. Like he's a competitive guy like me. Like there's not really anything you can say at this point that'll hurt my feelings. Like I get where it's coming from. I'm gonna play as much as I can this season. It's just
It feels
it
like a
sounds
honest
like
answer from Jimmy too.
yeah, it's like you could say like, "Oh, that's the easy thing to say," but it's not for these guys. Like these guys are the most competitive people in the world. They want to be like, "F that dude." Like I brought every success to this, like you could go crazy. So I appreciate guys just giving the right answers at media day. That's really my only takeaway. You can't solve the season at media day, but you can hurt it a little bit. So I
Yeah.
appreciate when guys don't do
There
that.
was one other thing I did want to mention. I have not been super high on all the Bronny and Bron hoopla, just because I really, really want to win some games this year. I don't want to stink or be average. But I will admit, seeing those two guys media day, they had a lot of back and forth, a lot of like good natured ribbing. It has to warm even the coldest heart, which
Yep.
is mine. But I really had a great time seeing those guys. It was truly a beautiful thing, and I think that Bron just maybe having the happiest, like being in the best mood he's ever been in a Laker uniform, is going to mean a lot because he did talk about how he has nothing left. Like they asked him, like, "Are you playing for anything, or like what do you have to do?" He's like, "Nothing. This is all just extra credit." Which to a Laker fan kind of feels like, "Are you locked into like you have to?"
It means a little something,
Right.
right?
I
Like
mean, but the fact that Ronnie's there, I think he's just going to be in a fantastic mood all year long, which is going to be good for the Lakers. So that was fun to see.
yeah. Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. I had that exact thought. I was like, if you don't think this is cool, like you have your heart's gone.
Yes.
Like I literally is like Goku and Gohan just like going to like fight Cell or something. It's like this is just the most wholesome like father son. Which I guess Goku's not the best father, but
Right.
you get the point. It's like Piccolo and Gohan going somewhere.
That would be like if Bronny or if LeBron told Bronny, "Hey, I know you can guard Steph 1-on-1, bro. Just go do it. I believe in you."
It's like, he's like, I'm not helping you at all. Like, you got to do this completely on your own. I'm subbing myself out of the game. Yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, the vibes are up right now. It's an exciting time. We are in the month where regular season games will happen. We're at the beginning of the month. In about 3 weeks, we have actual regular season games.
Nice.
Super exciting. We got preseason coming. So there could be another trade. Who knows? Maybe Julius Randle is playing for one of our teams in a couple weeks.
Oh
Well, hopefully
no.
not, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But as always, thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Rational Confidence. We're happy to be back. Hopefully, we will have all three of us on the next episode. We're still planning on finishing our rankings of different positions. We have a lot to get to before the season,
I
so we'll try
know.
and get those
We
out.
got 2
For
season
sure.
previews to do.
I know we might do power forwards and centers in one episode, and we'll figure it out. We'll get the content to you guys one way or the other. But we always really appreciate you guys for listening. Especially, I do want to give a quick shout out to our off-season listeners because it
Oh,
is
yes.
very easy to just watch the NFL or watch MLB or do whatever you want with your life. So the fact that you guys are sickos like us that are thinking about the NBA every single day, we appreciate you for tuning in. It really means a lot. And we see the numbers. The numbers aren't always super high, but they're consistent. We know we have some loyal listeners out there. So we do really appreciate you guys.
Shout out to our guy AJ who invalidated our
Yes.
entire list. That was so funny to me.
Yep.
It was
Shout out to
so
AJ for
funny.
sure. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, obviously, like we're getting into the season. If you have any thoughts, like we want to hear from you guys. It doesn't even have to be a question. If you're just high on a team or something, send us that. You can do it Instagram, TikTok, YouTube comment section, or you can email us confidenceirrational@gmail.com. We do really want to hear from you guys. It's the whole point of the show is getting to interact with fellow NBA fans like us.
Heck
So
yeah.
for myself, Micah, my great friend Kaylin, we thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next time.